Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Be me. I live in the Bay Area of California. Nice residential apartment complex, several buildings, pool, gym, the works. Young couples, professionals, 9-to-5ers, single-wage slaves living above their means. Pricey usually but nice quality. Not much crime, occasional police car here and there, a couple instances of Amazon packages being lifted from the bottom floor. 4 stories. Coming back from a party, Lil buzzed making my way through the courtyard towards the stairs. The apartment is the last on a long open-air corridor with book-ending staircases. The stairway is directly adjacent to the door with a small wall connecting to separating the railing, likely foundational. It is so easy to take the staircase to avoid walking the long corridor from the other staircase. Reach my floor, 3rd. Round the small wall. I always glance down the hallway. Behind me are 2 apartments and I can see the square area of the landing of the stairs. But I always just glance down the corridor. Fearing to see something sinister but also hoping I never do. Nothing, as usual. The apartment next to me to my left down the corridor has a shitty front light that occasionally flickers, so it flickers as is tradition. I reach into my pocket for my keys. Brandish them. Make for my door. Easy 3 steps. 2nd step, I notice out of my peripheral movement. A large black dog walks in step in the direction I am going, as if heading to the apartment that would mirror mine but down at the end of the hall. At least 5 apartment doors between us. I stop and look. It turns and looks at me. Hard to tell the breed, don't have a dog. I am in a dog building but none of my direct neighbors have one, and most dogs at the complex are small Chinese dogs like Shibas. Seen a golden retriever, gold, yellow, German shepherd and a mixed collie. But this one I've never seen before. I stare at it. It stares back. I don't recall what compels me to say it out loud. What do you want? You aren't welcome here. The dog continues to stare. I stared back. This goes on for a few seconds that seem a bit longer than usual. I don't feel anything but my buzz, still feeling good. The dog does not have any defining features that stood out, just jet black, sharp ears. I am nearsighted, glasses etc., but the eyes seemed normal. At that point I was over it and just mentally whatevers and turned back to my door. Opened it, entered my domicile. Enjoyed the rest of my night without any thought of the black dog. The next day, a normal Sunday. That evening the apartment complex was plagued with constant power outages. PG&E citing transformer issues. A storm also was about to hit pretty big in the later evening. The power finally fixes itself around midnight. Rain hits hard, pouring. I have a covered balcony so I blast a cig, enjoying the ambience. The lighting at night is pretty generous at the apartment complex. The balcony is at the end of a narrow yet long garage lane. Garbage dumpsters at the end in an enclosed holding space. Apartments across from me are mostly quiet, blacked out. Couple balcony lights on down the way. As I'm about to flick my cig like a littering degenerate, I see it again. Stalking through the pouring rain below me. What a strange coincidence. The black dog. Its rear is to me as it is walking. I thought it didn't even look wet, at least from what I recall. It stops and turns to look up directly at me. You again, I said softly to myself. This time it doesn't stare me down. It regards me briefly and continues on. Weird. I go back inside and lock my balcony door. I usually don't. A few days have passed. Returning from a Costco run, I noticed a shit ton of police, 2 ambulances, fire trucks, etc. Something must have happened. The day goes on, slow and steady. Into the evening, sirens. Not unusual in suburbia at the edge of a city. Ignore it, but they get closer. The building across from me is bathed in blue and red. More cops, fire trucks, ambulances. Shit happens, life etc. I wonder what happened for a moment, like any human, and my thoughts go elsewhere. Days turn to nights, the weekend is at hand. My washer, dryer had been acting up in the past and refused to work that morning. I call maintenance. Usually a guy shows up, a young dude. We know each other visually over the years. Arrives to fix it up, but also has a satchel of letters.
Here, we are putting these on doors now, but I can give you this one now.
He rummages through for my apartment number, like it mattered if all the letters are the same as they usually do. I take it and put it on my counter and let him do his thing. He finishes, something about a bad starter or something, we'll put in a work order to get a new one in the next few days. Before he leaves I ask him as cool as I can, what were all the cops and ambulances for? He pauses a moment, prob wondering if he should even say.
A tenant had a heart attack, unfortunately.
Are they okay?
I don't think so. I believe they passed away.
He replied, moving out into the hallway. I grabbed the door to prevent it from closing completely. That sucks. What about the other time that evening?
I shouldn't say, but don't repeat it to any of your neighbors.
I didn't talk to them much anyway, so I agreed.
A woman took her own life. Pretty wild stuff.
He seemed like he wanted to get going, and so he left. I finish my laundry because it decides to work. Day turns to night. Go out for a friend's birthday. Returning full of food and buzzed, choking on a cig, I ascended my stairs. I reach the second floor and turn for the third floor stairs. Up I go. I finished my cig, so I discard it. Everything is open air, by the way. Give it a stomp. Fumble for my keys and pull out my phone to reply to a missed text. Slowly trod up the stairs to my landing. Reaching the final step, I release the text into the ether and pocket my phone. There it is. Close. Sitting. Regal. The black dog. There was enough space for me to move past it. It was close enough to take it all in. Jet black, brutal ears. The eyes were a muddy yellow. Groomed and beautiful, mouth shut. It looked like something you would see in some kind of idealized Renaissance painting of a lord and their dog. I put myself at the top of the stairs and it watched me. I looked at it further. I wasn't sure what to do. My adrenaline starts pumping, erasing whatever buzz I had left from the party. I don't recall feeling frightened or any crushing amount of dread. I just felt inferior, below it. Standing in the presence of something greater than myself. Like standing in an ancient ruin or church. It doesn't move, but I see it looking. Feel it looking. The paws are handsome, there is no single hair that is stray or unkempt. The same feeling of wanting to speak to it comes over me, like the first time. Let me pass. Out loud. I feel like my words are emptied into a vacuum. It stares at me for a few more seconds and tilts its head sideways, every so slightly. I didn't pause and took it as an affirmative. I moved around the corner to my door, keys in, door open. Inside. Door closed and locked. My hand hurt because I was gripping my keys into my skin so hard while I was standing out there in the hall with it. I wanted to look in the peephole in the door because I know I can see the direct area the dog was sitting. I get ready for bed, feeling suddenly drained. I sleep well, dreamless. The next day, I wake without any memory of the black dog. Saturday this time, normal as ever. The day goes on. While washing dishes, I see the envelope from the apartment complex. Drying my hands, I open it and read. A basic template letter about animal safety and keeping animals leashed at all times. Respecting apartment policy regarding dogs and maintaining the specific dog walking areas of the complex. How strange. That evening I got a call from my father.
Anand, Uncle Anand fell and is in a coma. Doesn't look good, he's on life support, and Aunt Anand and cousin Anand, daughter, are going to make a decision tomorrow.
It was his older brother. That particular uncle was a cool one, so we chat for a while about him and his life. The same Uncle Anon shared a passion for audio and music, which was my career. So we were moderately close, and he was always fun at family holiday parties and get-togethers. But that Uncle Anon had some dark issues, a secret alcoholic life, things that compounded over the past 2 years that I warned my father about. And warned him if nothing was done it would end badly. Uncle Anon, being up in years and older, refused help and even did so at a family intervention. The next day comes with no call, albeit feeling a bit bummed about him being in the state he was. On Tuesday I received another call from my father.
Anon, Uncle Anon was taken off life support this morning and passed shortly after.
I'm sorry, Dad. We talk fondly of Uncle Anon. My father, never being one for tears, seems disappointed and frustrated. That night I dreamed of the black dog and it spoke to me. But I forget what it said now.
I used to work at a quaint little coffee shop. A very small place nestled between the suburbs and the country. A quiet place with no crime. The coffee shop used to open at 5:30 a.m. until the owner realized nobody ever stopped in at that hour. The place would be totally dead until about 8 o'clock most days. Gave me lots of time to read, which I loved. One day, I set everything up for the morning shift. Grab a chair, pull out my book. Then I hear the front doorbell. Ding. In walks this tall man in a suit wearing a heavy long coat. Looks like he stepped out of a 40s movie. He sees me. His eyes dart around the room like he's making sure we're alone. I notice he's wearing gloves. He asks for a
Hot coffee, no cream, and a Danish.
I remember this because the cops asked me later about his order. It's so early I haven't even got the coffee going yet. Tell him it will be a few minutes while I brew a fresh batch. He looks annoyed, asks if I have anything I can make fast. He has an unusual accent I can't place at all. I tell him I can make an Americano. He tells me to make one and to hurry. He goes over to the window and looks around outside while I make it. The guy's energy is really freaking me out, so I just focus on making his drink. Hand it to him. He pays with a $5 bill. I notice there are flecks on his gloves that look like dried blood. I can tell he's noticed me noticing. Handing him back his change. He grabs my hand, money and all, and forces it down onto the counter. Looks into my eyes.
I'll be back for my change later.
He looks at me for a long moment. Then he hurries out the door. Panicked, I immediately call 911. I decide I need to get a look at the guy's plates too. I'm scared, but I know I'll kick myself if I don't do this. Step outside cautiously as I try to tell the 911 operator what happened and where I am. See a large truck in the back of the coffee shop pulling out. Looks a bit like a U-Haul. As it pulls out it turns right, heading back towards the front where I'm standing. I see the tall man in the passenger seat. Someone else is driving but I can't see them at all. The tall man is watching me watch the truck. He's got his gun resting on the window glass as they pass, flashing it at me. I rush back inside. A little while later the cops show up. I go over everything that happened and give them a description of the tall man. They seemed most interested in whoever was driving the truck. I tell them more than once that I never got a good look at the driver. Eventually they leave. Tell me they'll keep a car nearby at all times, watching the place, in case the guys come back. I will never see the tall man again.
Might have been a coincidence, but Grandma died several years back. She helped raise me. I really loved her, and I still really miss her. I used to spend whole summers at her place. We gardened together. We grew all sorts of cool stuff together, from veggies to fruit trees to herbs, basically everything. We had one orange tree that always struggled to give fruit. Always gave these small, bitter oranges that weren't good to eat. The year my grandma got sick, the tree looked especially bad. Looked like it was dying and we made plans to chop it down. But then Grandma died in her sleep. We cremated her. She wanted us to bury her ashes in the garden, kind of close to the orange tree. Soon after, the orange tree was revived. Gave more oranges than it ever had. They were all big and plump and sweet. I like to think it was my grandma giving me one last blessing. I miss her very much, bros. I'm agnostic, but I seriously hope there is a heaven just for her.
This reminds me of one. Not paranormal, because I'm not a schizo, but bordering. Be me, last year. Grandma gets sick, not unexpected since she had an untreated stroke and a little Alzheimer's, and was frail as shit to begin with. Grandpa won't let any of the grandkids come visit her so that we can remember her when she was healthy or some boomer shit. She dies. No funeral, just cremation. A month or two later, I have a dream. GF and I are moving or helping some family members move. Moving out of the house my grandparents lived in. Sit down, Grandma comes over, but she's young, like 30s or 40s. Packing more stuff, coming down some stairs. See Grandma, now old, leave the building without anyone else noticing. But I noticed and she knew I noticed. Wake up. I don't believe in much after death, but if there is, I like to think she came and visited. Not as good as your oranges, I'm afraid.
Let me tell you about the time a weird old man spent an afternoon with me and my family. Not paranormal really, and it has no punchline, but it'll keep the thread bumped at least. 12 years old at the time. Raised out in the sticks. Tiny property surrounded by an old wooden fence. There's a country road that runs along the fence for about a mile. Dad and I are outside doing some work one day when we see someone coming down the road. We never see anyone traveling down this road, much less on foot. As the traveler gets closer, we see it's a very old man. He's limping along, carrying a leather satchel on his shoulder. Dad calls out to him. Invites him in for lunch. Dad never does this with strangers, but whatever, I don't question my elders. Old man follows me and Dad into the house. Mom serves cornbread and honey, and we eat in a really awkward silence for a while. Then the old man drops his leather satchel onto the table. He begins to tell us a weird story while we eat. Says he's a root worker, what people in my parts called a power man, from up north. Says he's been traveling several weeks, pursued by something. I assume he means an animal's been hunting him. But it becomes clear he's talking about some kind of spirit. He just calls it a thing. Claims that this thing has been moving west along the Appalachian Trail, more or less, following him. A month ago, he stayed with a family in North Carolina, he says. Slept overnight in their barn. The next morning, the family's oldest son was found seemingly strangled in his bed. The family thought the old man had something to do with it. They chased him off the property. But somehow the old man managed to escape, with a limp. The whole story seems incredibly suspicious to me, but I'm 12 at the time, so what do I know, right? The old man says, it wasn't me that killed the boy, like he's reading my thoughts. Claims that this thing that's been following him was responsible for the boy's death. So far this fella isn't sounding like much of a power man to me. But Mom and Dad appear to believe every word he says. Even Dad, who hates people and is very intense, seems really relaxed around this guy. The old man reaches into his leather satchel. Leaves his hand in there. I shoot a glance at Dad. No reaction. Feeling very nervous, but decide to just keep my trap shut. Dad was not averse to beating my ass if I interrupted adults talking. Anyway, the old man goes on. Says the thing that's following him, whatever it is going to pass through our farm next. He wants to pray with us to keep it from harming us. Parents agree. The old man pulls his hand out of his satchel and reaches for my hand. I'm sitting next to him. Now we're all holding hands around the table. He begins to pray. The prayer is in French, which is weird. But even weirder, his hand starts to get really hot. It feels like when you touch the outside of a hot toaster. By the time the old man is finishing his prayer, his hand is starting to seriously burn. He concludes his prayer, says that we should all be safe, but that we need to be careful for the next few days. We're still holding hands at this point, and I notice his hand is now noticeably cool. Then, he grabs his satchel and gets up. Says he's going to move on to the next place to warn the next family. We follow him outside. The three of us watch as he limps down the road. I remember wondering WTF he kept in that fucking satchel. 2 days later, one of our cows dies suddenly. No obvious cause, just keeled over in the field. Otherwise, life goes on as normal. The end.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.